My name is Caleb, and this is the story of how my world crumbled into pieces on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But before I tell you about that devastating October morning, I need to take you back to where it all began. Because the signs were there, hidden in plain sight, and I was too blind to see them. It started 18 months ago when I decided to propose to Olivia. We'd been together for 3 years, and I was absolutely certain she was the love of my life. Working as a mechanic at my uncle's auto shop, I'd been saving every penny for almost 2 years, skipping nights out with friends, eating ramen for dinner more times than I care to admit, all to make our wedding day perfect. Olivia was everything I thought I wanted in a woman. Beautiful, with long auburn hair that caught the sunlight like fire, green eyes that seemed to see right through to my soul, and a laugh that could make the worst day better. She worked as a receptionist at a dental office downtown, and we'd met at a mutual friend's barbecue. From our first conversation about vintage motorcycles, she surprisingly knew more about Harley engines than most guys I knew. I was hooked. My father, Robert, had always been my hero. A former Marine who served 2 tours in Afghanistan, he came back with a Purple Heart and a limp he never complained about. After my mother died in a car accident when I was 16, it had been just the 2 of us. He taught me everything I knew about fixing engines, about being a man, about honor and integrity. At 52, he was still handsome in that rugged, weathered way that made waitresses smile a little brighter when we went out for our monthly dinners. The first strange thing I noticed happened about a year before the wedding. I'd been working late at the shop, trying to finish an engine rebuild, when I came home to find Robert's truck in our driveway. Nothing unusual there. He often stopped by to check on us or help with wedding preparations. But when I walked into our small rented house, I found them sitting unusually close on the couch, looking at wedding venue photos on Olivia's laptop. "Hey babe," Olivia said, quickly closing the laptop and standing up. "You're home early." "Actually, I'm 3 hours late," I laughed, leaning down to kiss her cheek. It felt cold. "What are you 2 up to?" "Your dad was just helping me narrow down reception venues while you were working. You know how indecisive I get." Robert stood up, grabbing his jacket with what seemed like unnecessary haste. "I should get going. Early morning tomorrow. Stay for dinner, Dad. Olivia made that chili you love." "Another time, son. I've got things to take care of." After he left, Olivia was quiet for the rest of the evening. When I asked if everything was okay, she said she was just tired from wedding planning stress. I believed her. I believed everything back then. The second incident happened 3 months later. I'd forgotten my wallet at home and came back during lunch to grab it. Olivia's car wasn't in the driveway, she was supposed to be at work, but I heard voices from inside. I assumed she'd come home sick and maybe called someone to check on her. I used my key to enter quietly, not wanting to wake her if she was resting. But as I approached the living room, I heard her laugh. That same laugh I'd fallen in love with, but somehow different. More intimate. "You're terrible, Robert," she was saying, her voice filled with an affection that made something cold settle in my stomach. "Am I?" I thought I was being charming. I froze in the hallway. My father's voice had a tone I'd never heard before, playful, almost flirtatious. "Olivia, we should probably..." I cleared my throat loudly before stepping into the room. They were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, but there was something in the air, a tension that felt thick enough to cut with a knife. "Hey, what are you doing home?" Olivia asked, her cheeks flushed. "Forgot my wallet." "What about you?" "I thought you were at work." "Dentist appointment," she said quickly. "Your dad stopped by to fix that leaky faucet in the kitchen." I looked toward the kitchen. No tools, no signs of any repair work. But I pushed the suspicion down. These were the 2 people I trusted most in the world. "Thanks, Dad. How much do I owe you for the parts?" "Don't worry about it, son. Just some washers. Nothing major." That night I checked the faucet. It worked perfectly, no signs of recent repair. But when I mentioned it to Olivia, she said Robert had fixed it so well that it was like new. I let it go, but something started gnawing at me. The third incident was the one that should have opened my eyes completely, but I was so deep in denial that I explained it away like everything else. It was a Saturday in August, just 2 months before our wedding. I'd planned to surprise Olivia with a picnic at Miller's Lake, the place where I'd proposed. I bought her favorite sandwiches from the deli downtown and drove to her apartment. We'd agreed to meet at my place, but I wanted to surprise her by picking her up instead. Her apartment complex was quiet in the late morning. Most people were out running errands or enjoying their weekend. I climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit, the picnic basket heavy in my hand, a huge grin on my face. I was already imagining her surprised expression. But as I reached her door, I heard voices from inside. male and female talking in hushed tones. "Can't keep doing this," the female voice said. It was definitely Olivia. I know," came the male response. "It's getting harder too." I knocked on the door, cutting off whatever he was about to say. There was a moment of silence, then hurried footsteps. Olivia opened the door, looking flustered. Her hair was mussed, and she was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" "Surprise picnic," I said, holding up the basket. "Who's here?" "Oh, that's..." She paused, and I could practically see her mind racing. "That's your dad. He's helping me move some furniture." Robert appeared behind her, buttoning up his shirt. His hair was also disheveled. "Hey son. Just helping Olivia rearrange her bedroom. Heavy dresser. In your good clothes?" I asked. He was wearing a nice button-down shirt and dress pants, not exactly moving attire. "Didn't want to go home and change?" he said, not meeting my eyes. That night I asked Olivia about the robe. She said it was a gift from her sister for the honeymoon. When I asked why she was wearing it in the middle of the day, she got defensive and said she'd spilled coffee on her other clothes. I was 26 years old, and I realized now that I was desperate to believe in the fairy tale. I wanted so badly for everything to be perfect, for my life to finally make sense after losing my mother, that I willfully ignored every red flag. Now, let me tell you about October 15th, the day my world ended and began again. The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of October day that makes Ohio beautiful. The leaves were at their peak, brilliant reds, golds, and oranges painting the landscape like something out of a postcard. I woke up in my childhood bedroom at Robert's house, where I'd spent the night per tradition. We'd stayed up late, drinking beer on the back porch and talking about everything except what was really happening. "You nervous, son?" he'd asked around midnight, his fourth beer making his words slightly slurred. "A little," I'd admitted. "But mostly just excited. I love her, Dad. I really do." He'd been quiet for a long moment, staring out into the darkness of the backyard. "Love's a complicated thing, Caleb. Sometimes we think we know what it is, but what?" "Nothing. Just make sure you're both in it for the right reasons." At the time, I thought he was just being philosophical. Now I realize it was the closest he ever came to a confession. The morning brought a flurry of activity. My best man, Connor, arrived early with coffee and donuts from the bakery downtown. My Uncle Pete and Cousin Jamie showed up to help load the flowers and decorations into their trucks. Robert seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual and disappearing for long phone calls. "Who keeps calling?" I asked during one of his absences. "Just work stuff," Connor said, but he looked uncomfortable. "Some client having issues with their classic Mustang restoration." At 10 a.m., we headed to St. Anne's Church. The same church where my parents had been married 28 years earlier, where my mother's funeral had been held a decade ago. It felt right, like completing a circle. The church looked magnificent. Olivia and her maid of honor, her sister Madison, had outdone themselves. White roses and ivy draped every pew, and the afternoon sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows created a kaleidoscope of colors across the altar. Guests were already arriving, filling the pews with the gentle murmur of conversation and occasional laughter. I stood in the small room adjacent to the altar, straightening my tie for the 10th time. The black tuxedo fit perfectly. Olivia had insisted we go to a high-end rental place in Columbus, even though it stretched our budget. "This is our one wedding day," she'd said. "We need to look perfect." Connor was pacing behind me, going over the timeline for the ceremony. Pictures at 2:30, ceremony starts at 3 o'clock sharp. Reception begins at 5 o'clock at the Grandview Hotel. Your dad has the rings and Madison has your vows backup copy in case you forget them. "I won't forget them," I said, patting my jacket pocket. "I've been practicing for weeks." "Good man. Olivia's going to cry when she hears them." "Hell, I might cry, and I'm not even the emotional type." Robert had been unusually quiet all morning, but I attributed it to pre-ceremony nerves. He'd never been comfortable being the center of attention, and as my best man, he'd have to give a speech at the reception. At 2:15, 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I decided to take a quick walk through the church to make sure everything was ready. The photographer was already positioning guests for pre-ceremony shots, and the organist was running through her pieces one final time. I was heading back toward the preparation room when I heard voices coming from the small prayer chapel at the side of the church. It was a tiny room, meant for private reflection, with just a few pews and a simple wooden cross on the wall. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see shadows moving inside. I was about to walk past when I recognized the voices. "Robert, this is insane. I'm getting married in 15 minutes. I know, sweetheart. I know. But I had to see you alone one more time. My feet froze to the marble floor. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. After today, everything changes, Olivia's voice continued, thick with emotion. I'll be your son's wife. You think I don't know that? You think this isn't tearing me apart? I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it. Through the crack in the door, I could see them standing close together in the dim light of the chapel. How long can we keep pretending? Olivia asked. It's been 14 months, Robert. 14 months of lying to the sweetest, most trusting man in the world. 14 months. Not 1 year like I'd thought I heard later. 14 months. They'd started their affair just 2 months after I proposed. We don't have a choice, Robert said, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine anguish. What are we supposed to do? Tell him the truth and destroy his life? Tell him his fiancée and his father have been, that we've been in love, Olivia finished quietly. We've been in love, Robert. You can say it. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't make this harder than it already is. Harder? You think this is hard for you? I'm about to marry your son while being in love with you. I'm about to promise to love, honor, and cherish him while my heart belongs to someone else entirely. Through the crack, I watched as Robert reached out and touched her face gently. The tenderness in the gesture was like a physical blow. Olivia, what we have, it's real. It's the most real thing I've ever felt in my life. But it's also impossible. He's my son. My only child. I know. God, I know. But Robert, when you touch me, when you look at me the way you're looking at me right now. Her voice trailed off into something like a sob. After today we have to stop. We have to find a way to end this. How? How do we just stop feeling this way? I don't know. Maybe I should move away. Transfer to the Denver branch like they've been asking me to. No. Olivia's voice was urgent. I can't lose you completely. There has to be another way. Like what? Secret meetings? Stolen moments? Living a lie forever? If that's what it takes. No. Robert's voice was firm. I won't do that to Caleb. I've already betrayed him enough. After today we pretend this never happened. We play our roles. You'll be his wife and I'll be his father, and we'll bury this so deep that maybe someday we'll convince ourselves it wasn't real. I watched as Olivia moved closer to him, close enough that their bodies were almost touching. It was real, Robert. This is real. What I feel for you is more real than anything I've ever experienced. Olivia. Tell me you love me. Just once more before I go out there and promise myself to someone else. There was a long pause. I held my breath, part of me hoping he would refuse, that he would show some shred of loyalty to his son. I love you, he whispered. God help me, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. More than his mother, more than anyone. And then, in the soft light of the prayer chapel 15 minutes before I was supposed to marry her, I watched my father kiss my fiancée. It wasn't a gentle goodbye kiss. It was desperate, passionate, the kiss of two people who thought they were stealing their last moment together. Her hands tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. They kissed like the world was ending. And for me it was. I don't remember backing away from the door. I don't remember walking back to the preparation room. The next thing I knew, Connor was shaking my shoulder. Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost. You okay? I stared at him, this friend who'd known me since high school, and realized I couldn't tell him what I'd just witnessed. I couldn't say the words out loud because that would make it real. Just nerves, I managed to say. Well, shake them off. It's showtime. The next 20 minutes passed like a nightmare. I stood at the altar watching the church fill with our friends and family, all of them smiling and excited for what they thought was a celebration of love. The irony was suffocating. Robert took his place beside me as my best man, and I had to resist the urge to punch him right there in front of God and everyone. Instead, I studied his face, looking for signs of guilt, of remorse, of anything that might indicate he felt bad about what he was doing. He looked nervous, yes, but also resolved. Like a man who'd made a difficult decision and was prepared to live with it. The organist began the wedding march and everyone stood. At the back of the church, Olivia appeared in the doorway, and I heard the collective intake of breath from the guests. She was stunning in her white gown, a vision of bridal perfection. Her dress was classic off-the-shoulder lace with a long train that seemed to float behind her as she walked. But I wasn't seeing her beauty anymore. I was seeing the woman who had just been passionately kissing my father 20 minutes earlier. I was seeing the actress who was about to give the performance of her lifetime. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes found mine and she smiled that radiant bridal smile. But then, for just a moment, her gaze flickered to Robert beside me, and I saw something pass between them. A look of such longing and sorrow that it made my stomach turn. The ceremony began, and Reverend Williams started his traditional opening about marriage being a sacred bond. Each word felt like mockery. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join Caleb and Olivia in holy matrimony, a union blessed by God and witnessed by family and friends. I found myself studying the faces in the crowd. My Uncle Pete beaming with pride. Olivia's parents in the front row, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Connor grinning like an idiot. All of them innocent, all of them believing in the fairy tale. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but with careful thought and mutual respect. The Reverend continued with the traditional ceremony, but his words seemed to echo strangely in my head. When he reached the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, I felt a moment of wild hope. Maybe Robert would speak up. Maybe Olivia would find her conscience. The silence stretched on, broken only by someone's cough in the back pews. If no one objects, we will continue with the vows. That's when I made my decision. Not the smart decision, not the mature decision, but the only decision I felt I could live with. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church, I have something to say. A murmur went through the crowd. Olivia's eyes widened in panic. Robert went pale. Caleb? Reverend Williams looked confused. This isn't typically when the groom speaks, son. I know. But there's something everyone needs to hear before we continue. Caleb, please, Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. Don't do this. Don't do what, sweetheart? Tell the truth. The murmur from the crowd grew louder. People were shifting in their seats, sensing drama. I think, I said, looking directly at Robert, that my best man has something he'd like to share with everyone. Don't you, Dad? Robert's face had gone from pale to gray. Son, this isn't the time or place. When is the time and place? After the ceremony? After the honeymoon? After we have kids? When exactly were you planning to tell me that you've been sleeping with my fiancée for over a year? The church erupted. Gasps, shocked exclamations, people standing up to get a better view. Olivia made a sound like a wounded animal and grabbed my arm. Caleb, please let me explain. Explain what? How it started. When it started. How many times? How you managed to look me in the eye every single day while betraying me with my own father. That's enough. Robert's voice boomed through the church, his Marine training taking over. Everyone needs to calm down. Calm down? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father and my fiancée have been having an affair and I should calm down? I just watched them kissing in the prayer chapel 20 minutes ago, and I should calm down. The chaos in the church reached a fever pitch. Olivia's mother was crying openly. Her father was on his feet, looking like he wanted to attack someone but wasn't sure who. Connor was staring at me like I'd lost my mind. This is a house of God, Reverend Williams said, trying to regain control. Perhaps we should. Perhaps we should what? I turned to face the crowd. Pretend everything is fine? Go through with this farce? Let me marry a woman who's in love with my father? Caleb, stop. Olivia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. You're ruining everything. I'm ruining everything? I'm ruining everything? I stared at her in disbelief. Lady, you ruined everything the first time you kissed my father. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of people they're celebrating. Robert stepped forward, his face hard. You want to do this here? In front of everyone? Fine. Yes, Olivia and we developed feelings for each other. It wasn't planned, it wasn't intentional, and it sure as hell wasn't easy. But we decided to end it. That's why. That's why what? That's why you were making out with her 20 minutes before she married me? That's ending it? The admission hit the crowd like a bomb. Several people stood up and started heading for the exits. Others were pulling out their phones, probably texting or calling people who weren't there. Olivia collapsed into tears, her beautiful wedding dress pooling around her as she sank onto the steps of the altar. I never meant for this to happen. I love you, Caleb. I do love you. But you love him more. She looked up at me, mascara streaked down her face, and for the first time in months she told me the complete truth. Yes. That single word hit me harder than all the rest of it combined. Not the lies, not the sneaking around, not even watching them kiss. That simple, honest yes broke something in me that I didn't even know could be broken. I pulled the wedding ring out of my pocket. The ring I'd saved for months to buy, the ring I'd been so excited to put on her finger, and set it gently on the altar. Then there's nothing else to say. I started to walk away, but Robert grabbed my arm. Son, please. Let's talk about this privately. We can work through this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. You're not my father anymore. A father doesn't do what you did. A father doesn't betray his son like this. Caleb, don't call my name. Don't touch me. Don't ever speak to me again. I pulled free and walked down the aisle of the church I'd dreamed of getting married in, past the faces of friends and family who were staring at me with mixtures of pity, shock, and confusion. Some were crying. Some were whispering. Some were still trying to process what had just happened. Connor caught up with me in the parking lot as I was getting into my truck. Dude, wait. Where are you going? Away. You can't just drive off. We need to talk about this. Figure out what to do next. What to do next? I laughed bitterly. What I do next is try to figure out how to live with the fact that the two people I trusted most in the world spent over a year lying to my face. But where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere they're not. I drove for hours that day, still wearing my tuxedo with no destination in mind. I ended up at Miller's Lake, the place where I'd proposed to Olivia just 18 months earlier. I sat on the same fallen log where I'd gotten down on one knee, staring out at the water, trying to process what my life had become. My phone rang constantly. Olivia, Robert, Connor, my Uncle Pete, even Olivia's parents. I finally turned it off and threw it in the glove compartment. As the sun set over the lake, I realized I was going to have to go home eventually. I was going to have to face the aftermath of what had happened. But for those few hours, I just sat in the silence and let myself grieve for the life I'd thought I was going to have. The next few days were a blur of difficult conversations and painful realizations. I had to call the hotel and cancel the reception, losing our deposit, of course. I had to return the tuxedo, deal with the flowers, figure out what to do with all the wedding gifts that had already been delivered to our house. Olivia came by twice. The first time I wouldn't let her in. The second time, I opened the door but told her she had 5 minutes to get whatever she needed, and then I never wanted to see her again. Caleb, please, she begged. Can we just talk? I can explain everything. What's to explain? You fell in love with my father. You had an affair with him for over a year. You were going to marry me anyway and keep seeing him. What part of that needs explanation? It wasn't like that. It wasn't planned. We tried to fight it. For how long? A day? A week? When exactly did you try to fight it, Olivia? She couldn't answer that. The thing I keep coming back to, I said, loading her clothes into boxes, is that you were going to go through with it. You were going to marry me knowing you were in love with someone else. How is that not the most selfish, cruel thing you could possibly do to another human being? Because I thought maybe I could learn to love you the way you deserved. I thought maybe if I tried hard enough. You thought you could fake it. You thought you could spend the rest of your life pretending to be my devoted wife while sneaking around with my father. We were going to end it after the wedding. Robert was even talking about moving to Denver. Oh, how noble of you both. You were going to end your affair after using me to provide you with a perfect cover story. I'd be the devoted husband who never suspected a thing, and you'd be the grieving daughter-in-law missing her father-in-law who moved away. She started crying again. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me, because I've been trying to understand for 3 days, and I can't make sense of any of it. She sat down heavily on the couch we'd picked out together 6 months earlier. It started so innocently. You were working so much overtime trying to save money for the wedding. I was lonely and Robert was helping with the wedding planning. We spent a lot of time together and we just connected. When did it become physical? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. I need to know how long I was living in a fantasy. 6 months after it started. So about 8 months ago. 8 months. I sat down across from her, trying to do the math in my head. The weekend I went to Chicago for Connor's bachelor party. That's when it happened, isn't it? She nodded miserably. I called you that night. You said you missed me. I did miss you. But you were in bed with my father. Caleb, were you in bed with my father when I called to say I missed you? Another nod. Jesus Christ. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at nothing. How many times? How many times did you sleep with him? I don't see how that helps. How many times, Olivia? I don't know. I didn't keep count. We didn't plan it. It just happened when it happened. Weekly? Monthly? Maybe twice a week on average. I did the math. 8 months, twice a week. Roughly 60 times. 60 times my fiancée had sex with my father while I was planning our future together. Where? What? Where did you do it? My house. His house. Your apartment? Hotels? Caleb, please stop torturing yourself. Answer the question. Mostly at my apartment. Sometimes at his house when you were working late. In my childhood home. In the house where my mother lived and died. We never used your parents' bedroom. We would never. Oh, how thoughtful. You screwed my father all over my childhood home, but you drew the line at my dead mother's bed. I'm sure she would have appreciated the gesture. That was cruel and I knew it, but I was past caring about being fair. She cried harder. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. But I need you to know that what happened between us, between you and me, that was real too. I did love you. Did you? Or did you love the idea of me? The safety I represented? The perfect life I was offering you? Both. I loved both. But not enough to be faithful. Not enough to be honest. Not enough to choose me over him. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. No. Not enough for any of that. At least she was finally being honest. After she left that day, I sat in our empty house, my empty house now, and tried to figure out what to do with my life. I'd built everything around her, around us. My job, my house, my plans for the future. All of it had to be reconsidered now. Robert tried to contact me several times over the following weeks. He showed up at the auto shop twice, but I had Connor throw him out both times. He left voicemails that I deleted without listening to. He even sent a letter that I burned without reading. The truth was his betrayal hurt worse than Olivia's. I'd loved her, yes, but I'd worshipped him. He was my hero, my role model, the man I'd tried to become. Finding out he was capable of such deception and selfishness shattered my entire worldview. 3 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, Connor found me working late in the shop, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of engine repair. You know, he said, settling onto a stool next to my workbench, you're going to have to talk about this eventually. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Because this anger you're carrying around? It's going to eat you alive if you don't deal with it. I'm dealing with it fine. Really? When's the last time you went home before midnight? When's the last time you ate a real meal? When's the last time you talked to anyone about anything other than carburetors and timing belts? I didn't answer because he was right. Look, Connor continued, I'm not saying you should forgive them. What they did was unforgivable. But you need to find a way to move forward that doesn't involve slowly destroying yourself. How do I move forward from this, Connor? How do I ever trust anyone again? How do I ever believe that someone loves me when the last person who said it was lying for over a year? I don't know, man. But I know hiding in this shop isn't the answer. That conversation was the beginning of my long, slow climb back to something resembling a normal life. I started seeing a therapist, something I never thought I'd do, and slowly began to process the anger and betrayal I was carrying around. One of the hardest things was dealing with the community response. In a town the size of ours, everyone knew everyone else's business. The story of what happened at St. Anne's Church spread quickly, and people didn't know how to treat me. Some were sympathetic. Others seemed to think I'd handled it wrong, that I should have dealt with it privately instead of airing my dirty laundry in public. You embarrassed yourself more than you embarrassed them, Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store told me one day while I was buying a frozen dinner. A real man would have handled that situation with more dignity. I wanted to ask her exactly how much dignity she thought was appropriate when discovering your fiancé and father were having an affair, but I just paid for my groceries and left. Others were more supportive. My Uncle Pete offered to let me stay with his family for as long as I needed. Several of the guys from the shop made it clear that Robert wasn't welcome there anymore, even though he'd never officially worked for us. The hardest part was the holidays. Thanksgiving was approaching, and for the first time in my adult life, I had nowhere to go. Olivia and I had always spent it with Robert, and obviously that wasn't an option. Uncle Pete invited me to join his family, but the thought of sitting around a table, pretending to be thankful for anything, made me sick. Instead, I volunteered at the homeless shelter downtown, serving meals to people who had even less than I did. It put things in perspective. Yes, my heart was broken. Yes, I'd been betrayed in the worst possible way. But I still had my health, my job, a roof over my head. Some problems were worse than others. It was at the shelter that I met Angela, a volunteer coordinator who'd been running the program for 15 years. She was in her mid-40s, divorced, with teenage twins and a practical, no-nonsense attitude that I found refreshing after months of people tiptoeing around me. "You're that guy from the wedding," she said during a break in serving. "The one whose fiancé was sleeping with his father." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me? Sorry? I believe in being direct. It saves time. My ex-husband cheated on me with my sister, so I know something about family betrayal." "Your sister?" Yep. Found them in my bed on my birthday, no less. Some people have no sense of timing. Despite everything, I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks. How did you get past it? Time. Therapy. And the realization that their choices said everything about them and nothing about me. I couldn't control what they did, but I could control how I responded to it. How long did it take? To stop being angry? About 2 years. To trust someone again? I'm still working on that part. Over the following months, Angela became a friend, then a confidant, and eventually something more. Not romantic, neither of us was ready for that, but a genuine connection based on shared experience and mutual respect. It was Angela who convinced me to finally confront Robert, not for his sake but for mine. You don't have to forgive him, she said one evening as we cleaned up after the dinner service. But you need to face him. All this anger you're carrying around? It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. I don't want to see him. I don't want to hear his excuses. Then don't listen to his excuses. Tell him exactly what you think of him and walk away. But do it on your terms, not because you're avoiding him. So, 6 months after the wedding disaster, I drove to Robert's house for the first time since I'd learned the truth. His truck was in the driveway and I could see lights on inside. For a moment, I considered turning around and driving away. But Angela was right, I needed to do this for myself. He answered the door on the second knock and I was shocked by how much he'd aged. His hair had gone completely gray and he'd lost at least 20 pounds. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes hung loosely on his frame. Caleb. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it much recently. I wasn't sure you'd ever. I'm not here to reconcile, I said quickly. I'm here to tell you exactly what I think of you and then I'm leaving. He stepped aside to let me in but I stayed on the porch. You were my hero, I began. My entire life you were the man I wanted to become. When Mom died you held us together. You taught me about honor, about integrity, about being a man of your word. And then you threw it all away for what? Sex. Some midlife crisis fantasy? Son. Don't call me that. You lost the right to call me that the first time you kissed my fiancée. He flinched as if I'd hit him. You have every right to be angry. What I did was unforgivable. Yes, it was. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that you were going to let me marry her. You were going to stand beside me as my best man, knowing what you knew, feeling what you felt, and you were going to let me promise to love and honor a woman who was in love with you. We were going to end it, he said weakly. No, you weren't. I heard you in that chapel, remember? You weren't talking about ending anything. You were talking about stealing moments and living a lie forever. You were going to make me an unknowing participant in your affair for the rest of my life. What did you want me to do? Tell you the truth and destroy your wedding day? Yes. That's exactly what I wanted you to do. I wanted you to be the father you raised me to believe you were. I wanted you to choose me over her, just once. He started crying then, this man who'd served in Afghanistan without shedding a tear, who'd buried his wife without breaking down in public. He stood in his doorway and sobbed like a child. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry, Caleb. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I hate myself for what I did. I've hated myself every day since. Good, I said coldly. You should hate yourself. You should hate yourself for the rest of your life. I turned to leave, but he called after me. She's gone, you know. Olivia. She moved to California last month. Got a job with some dental practice in San Diego. I stopped but didn't turn around. I don't care where she went. She tried to see me before she left. I wouldn't let her. I told her we'd done enough damage. Did you think that would make me feel better? That you finally grew a conscience 6 months too late? I thought you should know that it's over. Really over this time. I did turn around then, looking at this broken man who'd once been my father. It was over the moment I saw you kiss her in that chapel. Everything was over then. Your relationship with her, your relationship with me, the man I thought you were. All of it died in that moment. I know I can't fix this, he said. I know I've lost you forever. But if there's ever a day when you might be willing to try. There won't be, I interrupted. I'm done with you, Robert. I'm done with the past, I'm done with the anger, and I'm done with you. Don't contact me again. Don't come to the shop. Don't drive by my house. As far as I'm concerned, my father died the day I was supposed to get married. I left him standing in his doorway and drove home. For the first time in 6 months, I slept through the night without nightmares. The next morning I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a realtor about putting my house on the market. The second was to my cousin Jamie, who lived in Portland, Oregon, about job opportunities in his city. You sure about this? Connor asked when I told him my plans. Running away from your problems isn't usually the answer. I'm not running away, I said. I'm starting over. There's a difference. What about the shop? Uncle Pete's counting on you to eventually take over. He has other options. You, for instance. You're better with the customers than I am anyway. But this is your home, Caleb. Your whole life is here. No, I said, looking around the shop where I'd spent so many hours trying to forget my problems. My whole life was built around people who turned out to be liars. It's time to build a new life around different people. 3 months later, I loaded everything I owned into a U-Haul truck and drove west. Portland was a fresh start in every sense. New job, new apartment, new friends who didn't know my story unless I chose to tell them. I didn't tell them. For 2 years, I lived quietly, working at a vintage car restoration shop, dating occasionally but never seriously, building a life that was simple and honest and entirely my own. I thought I was healing. I thought I'd moved on. Then Angela called to tell me that Robert had died. Heart attack, she said. He'd been found in his living room by a neighbor who'd noticed his newspapers piling up. The funeral was Tuesday. She thought I should know. I hung up the phone and sat in my apartment, staring at the wall. I felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, no closure. Just empty. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I didn't call anyone to express condolences. As far as I was concerned, the man who'd been my father had died 2.5 years earlier in a church chapel. But 3 weeks later I got a call from his lawyer. Robert had left me everything: the house, his truck, his savings, his life insurance policy. Everything except a letter, which the lawyer said had specific instructions to be given to me only if I came to claim the inheritance in person. I almost didn't go. I almost told the lawyer to donate everything to charity. But curiosity won out, and I found myself on a plane back to Ohio for the first time since I'd left. The lawyer's office was downtown, in the same building where I'd signed my marriage license 3 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was very specific about this letter, the lawyer, Mr. Patterson, explained. I was to give it to you only if you came here personally, and only after you'd decided whether or not to accept the inheritance. I don't want his money, I said immediately. Give it to charity, give it to the church, I don't care. Are you sure? It's a substantial amount. The house alone is worth over $200,000, and there's another $150,000 in savings and life insurance. $350,000. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. Money that could change my life, set me up for the future, give me security I'd never had growing up. Blood money. I'm sure, I said. I don't want anything from him. Mr. Patterson nodded and handed me a sealed envelope. He said to give you this regardless of your decision about the inheritance. I almost threw it away without reading it. I carried it around Portland for a week, debating whether to open it or burn it. Finally, on a rainy Thursday night, alone in my apartment with a beer I wasn't really drinking, I opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten in Robert's careful script. Asterisk Caleb. If you're reading this, I'm dead and you've just turned down everything I tried to leave you. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't have taken it either. I've started this letter 100 times over the past 2 years, and I never know what to say. How do you apologize for the unforgivable? How do you explain the unexplainable? I can't. I can't explain why I fell in love with your fiancée. I can't explain why I pursued her when I knew it was wrong. I can't explain why I was willing to let you marry her while I continued the affair. There is no explanation that makes any of it acceptable. What I can tell you is this: every day since that wedding day has been hell. Not because of what I lost, but because of what I took from you. I took your innocence, your trust, your faith in people. I took the wedding day you dreamed of, the marriage you'd planned for, the future you'd worked so hard to build. I took your father away from you when you'd already lost your mother. I know you think I chose Olivia over you, but you're wrong. I never chose her. I was weak and selfish, and I let something happen that never should have happened. But when it came down to the final choice, tell you the truth or let you live a lie, I chose the lie because I thought it would hurt you less. I was wrong about that too. You were right about everything you said to me that day on my porch. I was supposed to be the father you raised me to believe I was. I was supposed to choose you over her. I was supposed to protect you, not betray you. I failed at the most important job I ever had, being your father. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it because I don't deserve it. What I want is for you to know that you were everything I ever hoped you'd become, and none of what happened was your fault. You loved honestly, trusted completely, and planned faithfully for a future with someone you thought loved you the same way. The fact that she didn't, that we didn't, says nothing about you and everything about us. I want you to know that I'm proud of the man you became despite having me as an example. I want you to know that your mother would be proud too. I want you to know that somewhere out there is a woman who will love you the way you deserve to be loved, and when you find her, I hope you'll be able to trust her despite what we did to you. Most of all, I want you to know that I loved you. Not enough to do the right thing when it mattered, but completely and without reservation. You were the best thing I ever did with my life, and losing you was worse than any punishment I could have imagined. I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry for all of it. Robert Asterisk. I read the letter 3 times, then sat staring at it for another hour. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Mr. Patterson. I changed my mind about the inheritance, I told him. I want to accept it. Of course. I'll start the paperwork. But I want all of it donated to the homeless shelter downtown. The one where Angela Martinez works. Set up some kind of fund in my mother's name. Are you sure? That's a lot of money to give away. I'm sure. And Mr. Patterson? I want you to make sure Angela knows the money came from Robert, not from me. I want her to know he tried to do something right at the end. After I hung up, I folded the letter carefully and put it in my wallet. Not because I forgave him, I wasn't sure I ever would, but because he was right about one thing. Somewhere out there was a woman who would love me the way I deserved to be loved. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to let someone try. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't overheard that conversation in the chapel. Would I have married Olivia? Would she and Robert have continued their affair throughout my marriage? Would I have lived my entire life as an unwitting participant in their deception? I don't dwell on those questions anymore. What happened happened. The betrayal was real, the pain was real, and the healing has been real too. I learned that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, but only if you're willing to take the risk. I learned that love, real love, doesn't involve lies or deception or choosing between people who matter to you. I learned that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you can also be the thing that saves you from a life you were never meant to live. Most importantly, I learned that other people's choices, no matter how much they hurt you, don't have to determine your own. Robert and Olivia made their choices. They chose deception over honesty, selfishness over sacrifice, momentary pleasure over lasting integrity. Those choices destroyed any chance we had of being a family, but they didn't destroy my ability to build a new family with someone else. I still carry Robert's letter in my wallet, not as a reminder of his betrayal, but as a reminder of the man I don't want to become. Every time I'm tempted to take an easy path, to tell a convenient lie, to choose my own comfort over someone else's well-being, I think about that letter. I think about the man who raised me to believe in honor and integrity, then threw it all away for something that wasn't even real. I think about how much pain could have been avoided if he'd just chosen to be the father I thought he was. And then I choose differently. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me ultimately taught me the difference between love and obsession, between commitment and possession, between family and DNA. Robert was my father by blood, but he stopped being my dad the day he chose his own desires over his son's well-being. Connor calls me sometimes, updates me on life back home. The auto shop is doing well under his management. Angela got remarried last year to a guy who volunteers at the shelter. The church replaced the carpet in the chapel where my world fell apart. Life goes on. Connor asked me once if I ever regret causing such a scene at the wedding. Do you wish you'd handled it differently? He said during one of our phone calls. Maybe pulled them aside privately instead of announcing it to the whole church? I thought about it for a long time before answering. No, I finally said. I don't regret it. They made the choice to betray me in secret. I made the choice to expose that betrayal in public. They wanted to control the narrative, to manage the situation on their terms. I took that control away from them. But it was pretty brutal, man. For everyone involved. You know what would have been brutal? Living my entire life married to a woman who was in love with my father. Having kids who looked like me but wondering if they were really his. Growing old never knowing that the two people I trusted most had been lying to my face for years. You don't know that would have happened. Don't I? They'd already been doing it for over a year. They were planning to continue doing it after the wedding. What makes you think they would have stopped? Connor didn't have an answer for that because there isn't one. The truth is, I'm grateful I found out when I did. I'm grateful I overheard that conversation. I'm grateful I had the courage to stop the ceremony instead of going through with it. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was humiliating. Yes, it turned what should have been the happiest day of my life into the worst day of my life. But it also set me free. Free to find someone who actually loves me. Free to build a life based on truth instead of lies. Free to become the kind of man my mother would have been proud of, instead of the kind of man my father turned out to be. That freedom was worth the pain. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.